They walked past him every day, never knowing. The man guarding the door owned everything behind it. He wasn't testing the company. He wasn't testing the employees. He was testing one woman.
Useless.
And the moment she discovered the truth,
Look at you, big
everything
for
would
nothing.
change. This is the story of a
Pathetic
man
man.
who hid everything to find something real. Welcome to John Leo Stories. If you enjoy powerful, well-told stories with meaningful lessons, consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads. Your support helps this channel grow and continue bringing you stories like this. Now let's begin. The Man at the Gate. Every morning at exactly 6:45 a.m., a man stood at the front gate of Hartwell Industries in downtown Chicago. Rain or shine, winter or summer, he wore the same navy blue security uniform. Pressed, clean, ordinary. Most people never noticed him. They swiped their ID cards, checked their phones, complained about traffic, and walked right past. To them, he was invisible, just another security guard. His name was Ethan Carter. He stood straight, hands behind his back, eyes calm and observant. He greeted everyone the same way. Good morning. Have a great day. Some nodded. Some ignored him. A few looked at him like he didn't belong in the building at all. Ethan never reacted. He simply watched. He watched who said thank you. He watched who spoke kindly to janitors. He watched who spoke down to people they thought were beneath them. And he remembered everything. At 7:12 a.m., the glass doors swung open again. A woman rushed toward the gate, heels clicking fast against the pavement. She was late. You could see it in her eyes. The way she clutched her bag. The way she muttered under her breath. Her name was Lena Brooks. As she reached the entrance, her phone slipped from her hand. Papers followed. Then her ID badge fell, sliding across the ground. She froze. People behind her sighed impatiently. Before anyone else moved, Ethan stepped forward. He knelt down calmly, gathering her things one by one. Here you go, he said gently, handing them back. Lena looked up, surprised. Oh, thank you, she said, breathing hard. I'm having one of those mornings. Ethan smiled slightly. Those mornings usually turn into long days, he replied. She laughed without thinking. That moment lasted only a few seconds. But something about it felt different. Lena walked inside, then stopped. She turned back. Thank you. Ethan, she said, reading his name tag. He nodded. You're welcome, Lena. As she disappeared through the glass doors, Ethan exhaled slowly. From the upper floors of the building, behind tinted windows, eyes were watching. Not security cameras. Real people. Executives. People in tailored suits who owned houses bigger than football fields. They saw the interaction. And one of them leaned back in his chair and smiled. Because Ethan Carter wasn't supposed to be standing at that gate. Not really. Ethan Carter didn't need the job. In fact, Ethan Carter owned the company. Inside the building, Lena reached her desk still thinking about the guard. There was something about him. The way he spoke. The way he listened. The way he didn't rush her, even when everyone else did. She shook her head. Get it together, she muttered to herself. Security guards didn't belong in her thoughts. Back outside, Ethan resumed his position. His watch buzzed softly on his wrist. A watch worth more than his monthly paycheck. He glanced at it briefly, then covered it with his sleeve. No one noticed. That was the point. Because this wasn't just a job. It was a test. A test his father had warned him about. You'll learn more at the bottom, his father had said, than you ever will at the top. Ethan hadn't understood those words at first. He did now. By 9 a.m., a man in a sharp suit stopped at the gate and scowled. Do you have to stand so close? The man snapped. Ethan stepped back immediately. Sorry, sir. The man walked away without another word. Ethan didn't flinch. But someone else saw it. From across the lobby, Lena paused. She watched the exchange. And something in her chest tightened. That evening, as employees streamed out of the building, Lena slowed her steps. Ethan noticed. She stopped in front of him. Rough day, she asked. Ethan met her eyes. They're all rough in different ways, he said honestly. She nodded. Then she surprised herself. Well, good night, Ethan. Good night, Lena. As she walked away, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But hope came with fear. Because if Lena ever discovered who he really was, this simple moment, this quiet connection, might disappear forever. And that was when Ethan realized something terrifying. This test wasn't about the company. It was about his heart. The secret he could never tell. By the end of the week, Ethan Carter knew something had changed. Not in the building. Not in the company, but inside him. Every morning, he still stood at the gate at 6:45 a.m. sharp. Same uniform. Same calm posture. But now his eyes searched for one person. Lena Brooks. She noticed him too. Not in an obvious way. Just small things. A glance before swiping her badge. A quick smile when she passed. A soft good morning that sounded like it mattered. Ethan told himself to be careful. This was never part of the plan. He was supposed to observe. To learn. To test people. Not to feel. But feelings don't ask permission. They arrive quietly. Then refuse to leave. Late one afternoon, the wind cut through the street outside the building. Ethan stood alone, watching the sun sink between the skyscrapers. That's when Lena stopped in front of him again. "You're always here," she said, pulling her coat tighter. "Don't you ever get tired?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he said. "But standing here reminds me why I started." She frowned slightly. Started what? He hesitated. 1,000 answers filled his mind. The truth hovered on his tongue. But he swallowed it. "Trying to become better," he said. Lena nodded slowly, as if that made perfect sense. They began talking more after that. Not long conversations. Just enough. Enough to feel real. Enough to matter. Inside the building, high above the gate, Richard Carter watched the daily security reports scroll across his screen. He saw his son's name. Every day. No complaints. No incidents. No special treatment. Richard leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. His son was doing exactly what he had asked. But there was one thing Richard hadn't planned for. "Lena, she's distracting you," Richard warned during a private call. Ethan's voice was calm. "She's reminding me," he replied. "Of what?" "Of who I am without the money." Richard said nothing. Because that was the answer he feared most. Days turned into weeks. Ethan learned Lena worked in marketing. That she had grown up in a small town. That she hated loud restaurants and loved quiet walks by the lake. Lena learned Ethan lived in a modest apartment. That he worked double shifts sometimes. That he sent part of his paycheck to someone he never spoke about. Both of them were hiding something. But only one of them was hiding everything. One evening, Lena sat beside Ethan on a bench near the building after work. The city buzzed around them. "I don't usually talk to people at work," she admitted. "Especially not like this." Ethan didn't ask what she meant. He already knew. "You don't have to stop," he said. She smiled faintly. "I won't. Unless you want me to." He looked at her. "I don't." That night, Ethan returned to his apartment and stood in the dark. The silence felt heavier than usual. He removed his watch and placed it carefully in a drawer. Then he stared at it. That watch represented everything he was pretending not to be. And everything that could ruin what he was building. The next morning, something shifted. A senior executive named Mark Dalton noticed Lena talking to Ethan at the gate. Mark frowned. He didn't like it. Not because of company rules, but because men like Ethan weren't supposed to exist in Lena's world. By lunchtime, whispers had started. By evening, Mark was watching Ethan closely. Measuring him. Judging him. Waiting. Lena felt it too. The stares. The subtle comments. "Be careful," a coworker warned her quietly. "People notice things." Lena didn't respond. She simply walked out of the building that evening and stopped at the gate. "Do you ever wish people would see you differently?" she asked Ethan suddenly. Ethan's chest tightened. "All the time," he said. She nodded. "Me too." That night, Ethan stood alone under the streetlights long after everyone had left. For the first time since he started this experiment, doubt crept in. What if the truth destroyed everything? What if telling her was worse than lying? And what if this test was no longer about learning others' intentions, but about confronting his own? Because the more time he spent with Lena, the harder it became to remember why he was hiding. And the more dangerous the secret became. Love without luxury. The first time Ethan and Lena spent real time together, it wasn't planned. It just happened. Lena had stayed late at work, fixing a presentation that refused to cooperate. By the time she stepped outside, the city had softened. The rush was gone. The noise was quieter. The air felt lighter. Ethan was still at the gate. "You're still here?" she asked. He smiled. "I usually am." She hesitated. "Would you like to walk?" she asked, surprising herself. They walked toward the lake. No fancy restaurant. No reservations. Just two people and the glow of streetlights reflecting on water. Lena talked about her childhood. How she learned early not to depend on anyone. How she'd watched people change the moment success entered the room. Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt. Didn't try to impress her. When she asked about him, he chose his words carefully. I learned that money can make people loud, he said. But silence shows you who they really are. She looked at him. That's an unusual thing to say. He smiled faintly. I've had time to observe. They sat on a bench, sharing a simple meal from a street vendor. Lena laughed. I've dated men who spent more on watches than this entire meal. And, Ethan asked, and none of them ever listened to me like you do. That night, something unspoken formed between them. No promises. No labels. Just understanding. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened. They shared lunches on concrete steps. Watched the city from rooftops. Talked about dreams they were afraid to admit out loud. Ethan never paid for anything extravagant. He never needed to. Lena never asked for more. She liked who he was when no one was watching. But someone was watching. Mark Dalton. He noticed how Lena smiled differently now. How she defended Ethan when people joked. How she stopped attending after-work gatherings. Mark didn't see love. He saw disrespect. And he decided to end it. The breaking point. It started quietly. A comment here. A look there. Then it escalated. Lena was called into HR unexpectedly. They showed her reports. Photos taken out of context. Stories twisted just enough to sound believable. They implied Ethan had been dishonest. That he had hidden things. Used her. Lena felt the room spin. She left without saying a word. That evening, she waited at the gate. Ethan noticed immediately. You're quiet, he said. She held out her phone. Is there something you need to tell me? Ethan froze. This was it. The moment he had feared. He wanted to explain everything. But once the truth came out, it couldn't be taken back. I never lied about how I feel, he said carefully. That's not what I asked, Lena replied. Silence stretched between them. I needed you to trust me, she said softly. And you didn't. She walked away. The next morning, an announcement went out. Mandatory company meeting. Everyone gathered in the main hall. Executives lined the stage. Then Richard Carter stepped forward. He looked directly at Ethan. I believe it's time, Richard said. To stop pretending. Gasps filled the room. Ethan walked onto the stage in his security uniform. I am the majority owner of Hartwell Industries, he said calmly. I took this position to understand this company from the ground up. Eyes widened. Whispers erupted. Mark Dalton's face drained of color. Ethan continued. But what I found was more than business. I found truth. And I found deception. He exposed Mark's manipulation. The lies. The false reports. Security escorted Mark out. Lena stood frozen. Everything she believed had just shattered. Truth and resolution. That evening, Ethan found Lena by the lake. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. I didn't hide from you because I didn't care, Ethan said quietly. I hid because I was afraid the truth would change everything. Lena looked at him. It did change everything, she said. Then she paused. But not how you think. She stood. I love the man who shared hot dogs with me. Who listened. Who never tried to impress me. She stepped closer. And that man still exists. Ethan exhaled, relief washing over him. Months later, Ethan officially became CEO. But the gate remained. And sometimes, when no one was watching, he stood there, remembering where it all began. Because love, he learned, isn't found in luxury. It's found in truth. In the end, it wasn't the money that revealed the truth. It was the silence. The small moments. The way people treated someone when they believed he had nothing. He learned that respect given freely is worth more than admiration bought. That love built on simplicity lasts longer than love built on display. And she learned something too. That the right heart doesn't need proof. Only honesty. So if there's one lesson this story leaves behind, it's this. The truest connections are formed when no one is trying to impress. And sometimes the greatest wealth you'll ever find is being seen for who you really are. This story reminds us that kindness is never wasted, and humility always returns with interest. Because when everything else fades, titles, status, and applause, only character remains.